Imagine a world where a single spark can decide the fate of nations. For 100 years, we fought over black gold, watching deserts ignite and oceans churn as empires chased barrels of oil. The maps of the 20th century are stained with oil lines, from the Persian Gulf to the North Sea, each arrow a story of conflict, embargo, and uneasy alliances. Yet today, the battlefield has moved underground, woven through copper and steel, humming silently beneath our cities and farms. The invisible web that carries electrons to every light, every screen, every electric car is becoming the most coveted prize on the planet. Think back to the oil crisis of 1973, when long lines of cars snaked across highways and governments scrambled for a few extra drops of fuel. Fast forward to the dawn of the digital age, when power plants were deregulated and markets opened, and then to the present moment, where solar panels glitter on rooftops and massive wind farms spin on distant coasts. In less than a decade, the cost of solar panels has fallen by more than 80%, and battery storage is finally cheap enough to keep the lights on when the wind stops. The world is electrifying at a pace that would have seemed impossible just a few generations ago. Now three forces are reshaping the power game: geopolitics, technology, and policy. First, the geopolitical shift. Nations that once measured wealth in barrels of oil are now eyeing the flow of electrons. Norway, for example, harvests its mountains' waterfalls to become one of the world's largest exporters of clean electricity, while Saudi Arabia is betting on massive solar farms that could someday beam power across seas. China has spent decades laying high-voltage direct current lines that stitch together distant provinces, turning the country into a single, controllable grid. India's ambitious power for all program promises electrification for billions, but it also means new cross-border connections that could bind the subcontinent together in ways never seen before. Consider the high-voltage cables stretching under the ocean, like invisible arteries linking continents. A proposed Atlantic link could carry renewable energy from the windswept coasts of the United Kingdom straight into the United States, while a Pacific corridor might connect the solar-rich islands of Southeast Asia with the manufacturing hubs of Japan and South Korea. Whoever controls those undersea highways will have a seat at the table when the next round of energy negotiations begins. The conflict in Eastern Europe has already shown how fragile this new system can be. When Russian forces targeted Ukrainian transmission towers, the ripple effect was felt across Europe, forcing countries to scramble for backup power and exposing how dependent the continent is on a single network. In the Americas, the growing partnership between the United States and Mexico over clean energy trade highlights another emerging triangle: abundant solar in the south, storage technology in the north, and a shared grid that could shift the balance of power away from traditional fossil fuel exporters. All of this makes the electric grid a potential weapon. Cyber attacks can shut down pipelines, and a coordinated strike on a key substation could plunge entire regions into darkness. The 20-1 incident, where a ransomware group crippled a major pipeline, reminded us that digital threats can have physical consequences. Imagine a scenario where a hostile actor, instead of sending troops, deploys a virus that flips switches and disables thousands of miles of transmission lines. The strategic value of that capability is staggering. If this is blowing your mind, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Let's keep digging into how the world is changing. Beyond the politics, technology is tearing down the old monopoly of centralized power plants. Distributed energy resources are sprouting everywhere. Rooftop solar panels turning homes into tiny power stations, community batteries storing excess energy, and microgrids that can isolate themselves when the main network falters. In a suburban neighborhood, a cluster of homes equipped with solar panels and battery packs can keep the lights on even if the larger grid goes dark, essentially becoming a self-sufficient island of electricity. High-voltage direct current technology is another game-changer. Unlike the alternating current that has powered cities for more than a century, direct current can push electricity across thousands of miles with far less loss, making intercontinental power trade viable. Projects already underway aim to lay cables across the Atlantic and the Pacific, turning continents into partners rather than competitors. The cost of moving a megawatt of power from one shore to another is falling fast, and the technical challenges that once seemed insurmountable are being solved by advances in materials and engineering. Energy storage is the missing piece that finally lets renewables behave like traditional fuels. Lithium-ion batteries have seen their price drop to less than $100 per kilowatt-hour, and new chemistries such as solid-state and flow batteries promise even longer lifespans and safer operation. Meanwhile, green hydrogen, produced by using electricity to split water, offers a way to store vast amounts of energy for later use, especially in sectors that are hard to electrify directly, like heavy industry and long-haul shipping. All of these innovations sit atop a digital layer that turns the grid into a living, breathing organism. Sensors monitor voltage and frequency in real time. Artificial intelligence predicts demand spikes before they happen. And automated demand response programs can shave off megawatts in seconds by dimming streetlights or adjusting thermostat settings. This smart grid is not just a collection of wires. It's a massive data platform, and the data it generates is becoming as valuable as the electricity itself. Tech giants are already staking claims on that data. Companies that provide cloud services, artificial intelligence, and even electric vehicles are building their own platforms to manage energy flows, promising greater efficiency but also raising questions about who ultimately controls the information that decides when and where power is delivered. A future where a handful of corporations own both the physical infrastructure and the digital brain behind it could reshape the balance of power in ways we are only beginning to understand. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and I'm eager to hear how you see the next energy war unfolding. The conversation now turns to the rules that shape who can claim ownership of the grid's physical veins and its invisible nervous system. Nations are already drafting playbooks that treat electricity like a strategic commodity, and the emerging policy landscape reads like a chessboard where every move can tip the balance of power. One of the most striking developments is the rise of energy sovereignty as a core element of national security strategies. Governments in Europe, for example, have begun to label critical transmission corridors as protected infrastructure, subject to the same level of scrutiny and defense planning as airports and ports. This shift means that any attempt to disrupt a high-voltage line could be treated as an act of aggression, opening the door to diplomatic retaliation or even military response. The same logic is spreading across the Atlantic, where the United States Department of Energy is collaborating with the Department of Defense to map out potential choke points in the national grid and develop contingency plans that include rapid deployment of mobile generation assets. Across the Pacific, the story is slightly different but no less consequential. In Japan, the experience of the great earthquake and tsunami that knocked out vast swathes of the power network has sparked a national debate about decentralization. Policymakers there are pushing for a hybrid model that blends large-scale renewable farms with a dense web of microgrids, each equipped with its own storage and digital controls. The idea is to create redundancy so that if one segment goes dark, the surrounding nodes can isolate themselves and keep the lights on. This island mode philosophy is gaining traction in other island nations, where geographic isolation makes a single point of failure especially dangerous. China, meanwhile, is pursuing a more expansive agenda that fuses infrastructure, finance, and geopolitics into a single, ambitious vision. The Belt and Road Initiative, originally conceived as a network of roads and ports, now includes a massive rollout of high-voltage direct current lines that stretch from the deserts of the northwest to the coastal megacities in the east. These cables are not just conduits for electricity, they are arteries that will carry Chinese-made grid technology, standards, and software across borders. By embedding its own platforms into the fabric of other countries' power systems, China can secure long-term influence over how those nations generate, distribute, and price electricity. The strategic implication is that future trade disputes could be settled not just with tariffs, but with the ability to throttle or prioritize energy flows. The European Union is responding with its own grand project, the European Supergrid, which aims to knit together the continent's disparate national networks into a single, highly flexible system. The goal is to enable excess renewable generation in one corner of the continent to be instantly redirected to another where demand spikes. To achieve this, the EU is investing heavily in cross-border HVDC corridors, harmonizing market rules, and developing a shared digital platform that can orchestrate the flow of electrons in real time. If successful, the supergrid could make energy a unifying force rather than a source of friction, but it also raises questions about governance. Who decides when a country must curtail its own production to feed a neighbor? Who resolves disputes when the digital brain of the grid issues contradictory commands? All of these policy experiments share a common thread: the growing recognition that control over data is inseparable from control over power. The grid's digital layer collects terabytes of information each day, everything from weather forecasts and solar irradiance to consumer usage patterns and equipment health metrics. This data is the lifeblood of advanced forecasting algorithms that keep the system balanced, and it is also a prized asset for companies that can monetize it through services like predictive maintenance, demand response contracts, or even targeted advertising. As the lines between utility and tech firm blur, regulators are scrambling to define the rules of engagement. In the United States, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has opened a public docket to examine whether the current market design adequately protects the grid from monopolistic control of data. Some consumer advocates argue that utilities should be required to share raw sensor data with independent third parties under open source licenses, thereby fostering competition and innovation. Others warn that unrestricted data sharing could expose critical infrastructure to cyber threats, especially if malicious actors gain access to real-time load profiles that could be weaponized to destabilize the system. The debate is far from settled, but the outcome will shape the very architecture of the future grid. A similar tension is playing out in the realm of standards. Historically, the electricity industry has relied on a patchwork of national and regional specifications, which has made cross-border interconnection a complex and costly endeavor. Today, a handful of multinational corporations are championing proprietary communication protocols that promise higher efficiency and tighter security. If these standards become de facto, they could lock entire regions into a single vendor's ecosystem, limiting the ability of governments to switch providers or develop homegrown solutions. On the flip side, a universal open standard could lower barriers to entry, encouraging a more diverse marketplace of hardware and software solutions, but it would also require unprecedented coordination among rival nations and private actors. Beyond the technical and regulatory dimensions, the human element remains a decisive factor. The workforce that builds, operates, and maintains the grid is undergoing a profound transformation. Decades of training focused on large-scale generation plants are giving way to curricula that blend electrical engineering with data science, cybersecurity, and systems thinking. This shift is already evident in the hiring trends of major utilities, which report a surge in demand for specialists who can navigate both high-voltage equipment and cloud-based analytics platforms. However, the talent gap is widening faster than supply, and many countries are competing for a limited pool of experts. In the long run, the ability to attract and retain skilled personnel could become as strategic as the ownership of physical assets. All of these factors converge to suggest that the next energy conflict will be fought on multiple fronts, through diplomatic negotiations over cross-border cables, through legal battles over data ownership, through cyber operations aimed at crippling digital control systems, and through economic pressure applied via market mechanisms. The battlefield is no longer a desert oil field, but a lattice of steel towers, buried cables, and glowing data centers that sustain modern life. Imagine a scenario where a coalition of nations decides to leverage their collective control of renewable generation and storage to influence global energy prices. By coordinating the release of stored power during periods of high demand, they could effectively set a floor for electricity costs, forcing traditional fossil fuel exporters to adjust their pricing strategies. Conversely, a state with a dominant high-voltage network could threaten to restrict access for a rival country, using power as a diplomatic lever much like the oil embargoes of the past. The tools are more subtle, the impacts more immediate, and the stakes arguably higher because electricity underpins everything from hospitals and water treatment plants to financial markets and communication networks. At the same time, the private sector is positioning itself to become a decisive player. Large technology firms are building massive battery farms adjacent to their data centers, not only to ensure reliable power for their servers, but also to sell ancillary services back to the grid, such as frequency regulation and voltage support. Automakers are rolling out fleets of electric vehicles that can double as mobile storage units, capable of feeding electricity back into the grid during peak periods, a concept known as vehicle-to-grid. If these initiatives scale, corporations could wield influence comparable to that of traditional energy giants, shaping policy through lobbying and market participation. The convergence of these trends raises a profound question. Who will set the rules of the game? Will nation-states retain ultimate authority over the flow of electrons, or will a new class of multinational corporations dictate terms through control of both hardware and data? The answer will likely be a mixture of both, with power shared, contested, and renegotiated constantly. What is clear, however, is that the entities that understand how to blend physical infrastructure with digital intelligence will hold the most leverage. As we contemplate this evolving landscape, it is worth reflecting on the everyday experience of electricity. Most of us never think about the invisible network that lights our homes, powers our phones, and keeps our food fresh. Yet the stability of that network has become a cornerstone of modern civilization. When a storm knocks down a few poles, we might call a repair crew and wait a few hours for the lights to return. In a world where the grid is also a strategic asset, the same outage could be interpreted as a calculated move, a signal of intent, or even a trigger for broader geopolitical repercussions. The stakes are high, but so are the opportunities. A more resilient, decentralized, and data-driven grid could democratize access to clean energy, reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and empower communities to manage their own power needs. It could also foster new business models that reward efficiency and innovation, creating jobs and spurring economic growth. The challenge lies in navigating the complex interplay of technology, policy, and power to ensure that the benefits are broadly shared rather than concentrated in the hands of a few. So, what do you think? How do you see the balance of power shifting as electricity becomes the new currency of influence? Do you believe that international cooperation can keep the grid safe and fair, or will competition dominate the next decade? I'm eager to hear your thoughts, so please share them in the comments below. Your perspective adds depth to this conversation and helps us all understand the many facets of this emerging energy war.